Morning guys. Cheers. I'm just out in a wood local to home today. Just said in my other videos, I'm lucky just to have this place so close to home. You know, it is within walking distance. I thought today I just wanted to talk to you a bit about knots, common knots, and probably all the most common ones that you'll want to use when you're out, for example, bushcrafting, setting up a tarp. You may be tying guy lines, knots, you might be lashing. Knots can come in handy for all sorts of uses, really. So my plan is, I just digress slightly, and I say I used to be, for a long time I was part of a search and rescue team, and within that search and rescue team, as well as an operational member, as a training officer, but I also taught knots. So it is something that I'm familiar with. So that's what I plan to do today. Just some of the basic knots, really. The working ends of the rope, different types of the different parts of the rope, and then we're just going to talk about some basics. I think just things like the overhand knot, the clove hitch, the taut line hitch, that's your guy line rope, and I think we'll talk about half hitches and a couple of others as well as we move along. So that's that. So I'm just going to grab my tarp out and get my kit ready, then I'll come back to you and we'll start looking at these different bits of rope. So I've just taken a bright orange, obviously not very bushcrafty, certainly not very camouflagey, but I've taken a bright orange bit of rope, it's not paracord, just to show you the four main working parts of a rope. So we've got the working end and we've got the standing end, and the working end is generally the end that we're using to create the knot, and the standing end is usually the end that's going to whatever, either whatever we're tying to, or in our case, in the scenario I'm going to give later on, the standing end would be the actual ridge line for the tarp, and I'll be working with the live end. And the other two parts of a knot that we need to be aware of are the loop, which is just the working end passed over the standing end to create a loop, and a bite. And a bite is just bringing two pieces of rope together, like so. So we've got ridgeline, standing end, working end, loop, bite. Let's move on to some knots. So the most basic of knots, and it's one that we will all tie often, and that is just the overhand knot. It's for those of us that know how to tie our laces, it's the first knot you generally tie before you bow, and it's literally create a loop, and it's one working end over the standing end, until we create a knot. The other type of knot that we can use is a clove hitch, and a clove hitch can be tied in two ways, and this is a really useful knot actually. This is a self-tightening knot, and the fact that you can put it around something or over something makes it incredibly useful, and it's actually really easy. But once it's done up, it's bomb proof, but it's actually really easy to undo as well. So I'll just show you that. So the clove hitch is creating 2 loops, right over left and left over right. Bring them together, drop them over, pull tight, and that actually, when that is tightened, that is actually sort of in. That will not slip. I mean, it'll work better on a thicker log, but it literally, once it is tight, it will not move on anything at all. And then undoing is just a case of pulling the standing side, and off she comes. There's another way to tie this as well, and we can do that by going around something, which is why I say it's incredibly useful, maybe for a tree perhaps. So we take the live end, or the working end, pass it over the standing end, bring it back around. You'll see we've created an X shape. I hope you can see that. We've created an X shape, and we're going to take the live end and we're going to pass it straight through that X shape that we've created. I'm going to tidy it up, and then we've created exactly the same knot in a different way, and that is not coming undone at all until we pull that end, and there she is. Really as simple as that. Next one I'm going to show you, and this is one that I use for my ridgeline. I've got a bit of an unusual ridgeline setup, but it's the one that I use, and it works best for me. So at one end of my ridgeline I usually use a bowline, and a bowline is a fairly simple knot. So we'll take it around our tree. We're going to create in our standing end, we're going to create a bite, and if you remember nothing else, remember this, that we're going to come up through the rabbit's hole, we're going to go around the tree, and we're going to come back down through the rabbit's hole. So I'm just going to show you this again from a different angle. So we've got a tree here. My standing end is coming in from the left, and my working end is on the right. So I'm just going to create a loop. Do it a little bit further out so you can see easily. We're going to go up through the rabbit's hole, around the tree, back down the rabbit's hole. We can create the loop if we want to, and we can pull tight. That's not going nowhere, and with a little slip, we're out. We can do the hitch. Just going to come like an overhand, like we said at the start, over, around, and another overhand.
So just before we go any further, I want to show you how to tie a prusik. Prusik is a crucial part, I think personally, of your ridgeline setup, and I think most people would tend to agree. Most people use it, and it's a really simple knot. Essentially, it's a looped piece of cordage Now I have a double fisherman's in there, very strong knot for tying two pieces of rope together. Generally very good for tying the same size pieces of rope together, but more often than not is something that's used in climbing. And this is an old climbing prusik, and the reason I brought it with me today is to demonstrate that actually a prusik knot generally works better with different sized ropes. So for example, my little thin rope here and my little thick rope, in theory, if it were the other way around, if I were tying the prusik in my ridgeline around a thicker rope, it would grip much tighter than what my prusik will on my ridgeline, because I'm using the same cordage. That being said, they still grip very well. So the reason I brought this along is just to demonstrate it. It's much easier to show you how a prusik works with a big chunky bright piece of rope. And essentially we pass the top of the loop over, take your knot. I mean, this can just be this knot can just be an overhand, a regular overhand. In fact, that's what I've got in my prusiks on my Tarp. And we just pass it over, and this is called a 3-wrap prusik, and the reason for that will become apparent in a moment. And we keep passing it through until we've got 3 wraps of cord. We just need to tidy that up and make it look pretty, because a pretty knot works much better than a messy knot. And that is essentially, and you can see why it's called a 3-wrap prusik. 3-wrap prusik. As I say, it won't work so well here because I've sort of using it the wrong way around, really. Really need to be using thin on thick, and that works much better. And that is why this is, I think this is maybe 8mm prusik cord. Usually this would go onto a 10 or a 12mm climbing rope, and it grips exceptionally well. So my Tarp would usually be ready out to the bag, and I'd have it prepped with all the guy lines, prusiks, ridgeline, all attached to the Tarp. But for today, I've just sort of I've taken it all apart. I've left the prusiks on. I'll have shown you a prusik by now. So I've left the prusiks on, and I've just taken the rest apart. My cordage is all hanked up nicely, so this will just come away really easily. First thing we're going to do then is just tie this end. So today we'll call this we'll say that this is our standing end of the ridgeline, and all I'm going to do, I'm just going to take a loop around the tree. I've got an overhand at one end, and we'll tie that off with half hitch, just to make sure it is absolutely bomb proof, not going anywhere. And I'm just going to pass a loop through my overhand and through there, you can see that, and through there, and that is bomb proof. That's going nowhere. One end of our ridgeline is now taut and tied, and with this end, just to make life a bit easier, I'm going to hank the cord up. and all I'm doing is just thumb and little finger and crossing over. Round, cross, round, cross, round, cross, round, cross. And that makes it actually a very quick way to wrap. Not only is it a very quick way to wrap cordage, but actually when I throw this down, it'll all naturally untangle itself. So once we're done, we can just take it off, and I know now that that will just pull away as I need it. So I said earlier that we were going to do maybe a taut line hitch. I think what I'm going to show you instead is this sort of this friction hitch. This is what most people seem to use. I use a taut line hitch often, and I probably will show you that in a minute. So all I'm doing is I'm running round the back of the tree. I'm running around the back of the tree and coming back, wrapping round the ridgeline and going back around the tree again in the opposite direction, and that creates this sort of this type of friction hitch. And really, I mean, it does give you a pretty bomb-proof ridgeline. And all I will do then is pass my working end through there, and I'll throw a half hitch in. Hey guys, you can see that I've just left one corner of my tarp there, and what I want to demonstrate really is, hi Taylor, hi bud. What I want to demonstrate really is that if you're really stuck, a little bit of ingenuity will go a long way. So I'm just going to use a bit of a selection of what I've got here just to tie up the last corner of my tarp. So packed away, this is how my tarp would normally look in this bag. Ridgeline is the last thing to go in. So guys, hope you've enjoyed this installment. I just wanted to show you some basic knots and just throwing a tarp up quickly. I'm just going to set up the firebox. I'm going to have a quick brew, then we'll have one last chat, and then I think I'll be out here. Should be just enough for a brew, and a few acorns too. just thought that whilst I'm waiting for my brew, I'd take the opportunity to show you the taut line hitch. Essentially around your object, around your tree, and I'll take 2 fingers, I'm going to create a sort of a loop. I'm going to pass the live end or the working end over the loop that I've created and bring it inside, and I'm going to do that another once, another twice. So I'm going to do that a total of 2 times. I'm creating 1, 2, 3. I'm creating 3 loops. Then I'm going to bring my working end back over the first loop. So I've still now got my working end, and this piece that I've created, I'm bringing it back over the standing end, creating a loop and passing the working end through that loop so that she pulls tight. So it's going to be a little bit, and hold that end, pulling it all tight. Remember a tight knot is a good knot, and if I pull on that, that will, when it's tight, not go anywhere. That is solid, and yet it'll slip. That's a falconer's knot. We go across, create a bite, pass the live end through and pull tight. And there's your falconers. Really easy. Can be tied really quickly. If you really need to tie onto something really quickly. Falconer's knot. Hey guys, it's a beautiful morning, absolutely beautiful. So I just wanted to say a few bits before I shoot off, really, whilst I'm waiting for my brew, before I head off. So what have we done? We've covered a few knots, and we've put the tarp up. I realised I didn't touch on the taut line hitch like I wanted to, and it just turns out that the 2 trees I've chosen were just a little bit, they were close enough to put the tarp out taut, but they were just a little bit too far, too close together for me to fit in a taut line hitch. So maybe I'll show you that in another video. I'll just put one together specially for you. In fact, in the comments below, I'll put a link to a website address, awesome for learning knots. Can't remember what it is off the top of my head. I put a little note of it when I put the video together, and as I say, a link in the comments. But really, really good. All sorts of knots. Really, really detailed videos, step-by-step guides showing you how to put these knots together. And touches on all the different parts of the rope as well, like I mentioned earlier. So I think we covered an overhand, knot, we covered a bowline, a clove hitch, we've looked at prussics, hitches, and we have the other thing I would like to show you is a reef knot. That's really great knot for tying 2 bits of rope together, but generally for a reef knot, both bits of rope need to be the same thickness, otherwise it doesn't work so well. If you've got 2 different size pieces of rope, you can perhaps consider sheet bend, a double sheet bend, and that's really a good way of nicking two bits of rope together. Tilly, go away. Two bits of rope together that don't that are different sizes. So we put the tarp together. We've put some guy lines out. There are other kinds of knots as well. There are funky knots. There are one-handed knots. I could tie a one-handed bowline around myself, for example. Neat trick, party trick really. Never actually needed to do that. Falconer's knot can be a handy knot. That's a one-handed knot that you can tie with these 3 fingers. Called a falconer because obviously a falconer only has one hand available ordinarily. And there are an absolute plethora of knots. There are loads. Jump on our website, have a little look, see what you can knock up for yourself, see what unusual knots you can put together. Have a good practice. Can be a lot of fun, and you never know when you're next going to need a good strong knot. I mean, think about it now. Put yourself back in the real world, remove yourself from this place and think, what if my washing line snaps this afternoon? Then you need a decent knot to put it back together, don't you? I'd recommend a double fisherman's, by the way. Anyway, my brew's just about ready. Thanks for watching. Diolch yn fawr I chi. Fe gwelwch chi tro nesa. Hwyl am nawr. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time. Goodbye for now. Remember, down below, give me a like, give me a sub, please. Trying to bump the numbers up.